During the forgotten councils of Alexandria, a text was hastily sealed, as if it hid something too dangerous to be read. In it, the name of Seth was not merely that of a son, it was the name of a lineage of light that never bowed to the world. Why do so many ancient manuscripts treat Seth like a secret? And what was truly torn from his story? In an old drawer of a Coptic monastery, a torn scroll depicts a child wrapped in blue fire, surrounded by silence. The Bible mentions him briefly, but the forbidden Gospels treat him as a hidden pillar. Who was this figure? Why did the third son of Adam seem to carry a promise even Eden couldn't reveal? And why does this name still echo like a lost sound deep within the human soul? Seth was born after blood was spilled. Abel, the righteous one, had been taken. Cain, the wanderer, was already roaming nameless lands. When Eve conceives Seth, Genesis 4:25 records, God has granted me another son in place of Abel. But was he merely a replacement? Or did he carry within himself a new beginning? The ancient Hebrews saw Seth as continuity, but the Gnostics saw him as restoration. A restoration not only of the human line, but of something far more ancient, the divine spark that had been wounded. Why do spiritual eyes always return to the third son? What does he represent that the first two could not preserve? In the Book of Jubilees, a different memory is preserved. Seth is seen as the spiritual firstborn, even though he was the third to be born. There, he receives secret teachings from Adam about time, the temple, and the heavens. Unlike Cain and Abel, Seth is not merely someone who works or sacrifices. He learns to record the signs of God. He writes, he watches, he remains silent. His mission is not to conquer the earth, but to guard what heaven revealed before the fall. Who would entrust an ordinary man with the calendar of the angels? And why didn't these teachings reach us? The Essenes of Qumran spoke of a lineage of the righteous that would preserve the mystery of the Holy of Holies. One of the Thanksgiving hymns, 1QH, mentions children of light, who heard wisdom before time began. Could this be a reference to the descendants of Seth? While Cain builds cities and cultivates power, Seth retreats into silence and listening. In the Gospel of the Egyptians, there is mention of an immortal race, born of Seth, pure and incorruptible, a people who walk among humans but do not belong to this world. Why did this lineage disappear from the maps? And why were so many ancients afraid that it would be remembered? Seth is absence. He is what remains when all is lost. But he is also a promise of a path that does not end in blood, but in light. Eve does not smile when naming him. She prophesies. In the silence of the Hebrew words, the name Shet echoes as a foundation, a base upon which something new would be built. While Cain is mocked and Abel is silenced, Seth becomes invisible. And it is precisely in the invisible that the sacred dwells. Those who look too much at the screams fail to hear the whispers. And maybe that's why the world forgot the true role of the one who came last and remained in silence. In Codex 2 of Nag Hammadi, the Gospel of Thomas says, "Blessed is the one who was before he came to be," a phrase that ancient masters interpreted as referring to the Scythian race, those who remembered before they were born, those who didn't need to be taught because they carried truth in their hearts. If this is true, then Seth is not just a son, he is a mirror, a reflection of humanity before the fall, of who we were when we still walked with God in the garden. Have you ever felt that something inside you remembers what you never lived? What if that memory is Seth's inheritance in your spirit? In ancient Coptic traditions, there was a silent gesture performed at sunrise. 3 fingers touched the forehead, the chest, and the ground. It was the sign of the sons of Seth, a daily reminder that the body, soul, and world must align. This practice was erased from rituals, but it still survives in secret desert monasteries. Why did these traditions vanish without a trace? What did the triple touch represent? Perhaps an echo of Eden, perhaps a call to remember, because those who descend spiritually from Seth know they do not belong to time, but to eternity. Imagine a Bible without Cain, without Abel, only Seth. No murder, no loss, just silence, contemplation, and remembrance. A book where the first altar is made of listening, where there is no blood sacrifice, but the preservation of the name. Maybe that's why ancient seers said the lineage of Seth was not written in ordinary books. It was written in the eyes of those who could see beyond the flesh. When people look at you, what do they see? the rage of Cain, the pain of Abel, or the luminous silence of Seth. In the Ethiopian apocalypse, an angel descends with a blue stone in his hands. He gives it to a righteous man and says, "The name written here cannot be spoken, but it will be remembered by those who come from Seth." What does this stone represent? And why does it appear again in John's visions? Could this be the same white stone mentioned in Revelation 2:17 with the new name written upon it? And if it is, could it be that you've been carrying this stone all along without noticing? How many names live in you that haven't yet been spoken? They say that in the time of the end, the lineage of Seth will rise in silence, not as kings, nor as loud prophets, but as echoes, presences that awaken forgotten memories. They will not come to teach, they will come to remind. And perhaps that's why you've come this far. Because something in you stirs when that name is spoken, Seth. As if you knew, even without understanding, that this is not just a video. It's a mirror, and if something inside you has been stirred, leave in the comments what still resonates in silence, and subscribe, not to follow a channel, but to walk alongside those who still listen to what the world has forgotten. The world followed the trail of Cain. Cities were raised, empires formed, religions built upon conquest and stone structures, but the promise of Seth, silent and invisible, seems to have been forgotten along the way. In the Book of Jubilees, chapter 4, we read that Adam taught Seth the books of creation, spiritual records given by God before the fall. Why have we never heard of these books? And why are the descendants of Seth not counted among the most celebrated patriarchs? What happened to the lineage that was meant to guard the original light? At what point did the world choose power over remembrance? The councils that sealed the biblical canon never mentioned the teachings passed on to Seth. The Council of Laodicea, for instance, ignored the writings circulating among the desert Christians, many of which preserved traditions that came from Noah, and before him, from Seth. Oral tradition spoke of numerical codes that linked the days of creation to the steps of the soul. Fragments of these teachings survive among the Essene hymns and the mysteries of the Qumran community. How did this knowledge vanish? And if it were recovered, how would it change our way of believing? There is a lost teaching mentioned in 4Q Instruction, a wisdom manuscript found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. It says, "Teach the son of your spirit the ways of separation, for the world bows to deception." Who is this son of the spirit? Many scholars associate this title with the spiritual descendants of Seth, those who carry within them the seed of distinction, not between good and evil by human standards, but between what belongs to light and what belongs to illusion. Why was this silenced? And what would happen if this discernment awakened in us again? In the secret Gospel of John, preserved in Nag Hammadi, we find a direct reference. Then the invisible Father sowed an incorruptible seed in Seth, so that the children of truth might dwell among men. This passage is ignored by most institutional theology, but what it reveals is striking. The lineage of Seth was not of the flesh, it was spiritual. His descendants were not identified by blood, but by consciousness. And what if that lineage is still among us? What if it is the promise yet to be fulfilled, awaiting its awakening? In the Gnostic tradition there was an expectation. The return of the sons of Seth would bring the restoration of the inner Eden. Unlike the return of Elijah or the coming of the Messiah, this return would be invisible, a shift in the vibration of the earth, like a fragrance that spreads before a presence. In secret rituals of Alexandria, the day of the breath was celebrated, when the initiates repeated, "Remember the seed before it is too late," a plea to the forgotten. To the sacred memory that fades with each generation. How many times have you felt you knew something, but had no idea where it came from? When Jesus spoke in parables, he seemed to echo this promise. In Matthew 13:11, he says, "To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not." Who was he speaking to? And what if these "you" were precisely the spiritual heirs of that incorruptible seed? What does that say about you, and about what was reserved for your generation? The unfulfilled promise may be waiting for someone to listen. Maybe not the crowds, but the few. The very few. Those who can still hear the sound, the world silenced. An ancient Ethiopian legend speaks of the sons of the seven, a hidden group in the mountains of Lalibela who guard the flame of primordial wisdom. They do not speak, they observe. Their garments are simple, their eyes profound, and their mission to keep alive the sound of creation before the pain. It is said that when they die, they leave a stone upon the ground with 7 inscriptions. No one has ever deciphered the marks, but everyone who sees them feels something indescribable, a strange peace, a calling. And what if the promise of Seth is not found in books, but in silent stones scattered throughout the earth? There is a profound mystery in the genealogy of Luke 3:38, where it says, Seth, son of Adam, son of God. The phrase seems simple, but it holds a powerful inversion. Seth is not presented as a grandson, but as a direct link, as if the lineage of light skipped generations and connected to the divine with no intermediaries. That changes everything. It undoes structures. It returns to each human being the responsibility to carry the original breath. And if that's true, what is still missing for you to remember who you are? Perhaps the greatest promise is not that of a future heaven, but of a restored memory, a remembrance that ignites the soul like one waking from a long sleep. Perhaps the return of Seth is exactly that. Not an event, but a gaze, a gesture, a yes. And what if you are that turning point? If something in you carries this dormant inheritance, what is stopping it from blooming now? Share in the comments what pulses in your spirit. And subscribe, not to walk alone, but with those who still remember what the world has long forgotten. In the Codex Barolonensis, where the Gospel of Mary rests, there is a startling phrase. The Son of Man spoke to the one who listened before being born. Who listened before being born? Many Gnostic manuscripts interpret this figure as a spiritual descendant of Seth, one who does not need to learn, but only to remember. The soul of Seth is not born from clay, but from breath, and breath does not teach. It awakens. Have you ever felt something inside you ignite upon hearing words that aren't part of your history? Perhaps it's because they belong to a memory older than your life. Among the Essenes, silence was not the absence of words, but total listening. In the scroll of the community rule, 1QS, it is written, "The righteous shall meditate day and night so that the voice of the eternal may manifest as a gentle breeze." This practice was known as listening to the breath, a state in which the spirit aligned with what was spoken before creation. And it is at this point that Seth reappears, not as a historical figure, but as a spiritual archetype, the one who hears what the world does not. And what if listening is the true beginning of redemption? In Ethiopian tradition, it is said that Seth received from Adam the words without sound, spiritual teachings transmitted only through the soul's vibration. These teachings do not appear in the canonical texts, but survive in apocryphal manuscripts preserved by monks who still practice sacred breathing. With each inhale, they whisper, "I come from before," as if declaring that their identity does not begin at birth, but in an origin beyond time. Could that be why Seth does not represent the beginning of humanity, but the return of the soul? In the Gospel of Thomas, Logian 50, Jesus says, "If they ask you where you came from, say we came from the light, where it came into being by itself." This answer is not rational, it is existential, as if revealing a common origin shared by those who remember. And those who remember do not argue, they simply live with their eyes open. The breath that gave life to Seth still moves, still whispers, still calls, but few listen, perhaps because true listening requires emptiness, and those full of the world cannot receive the memory of light. The ancient rabbis called Seth the man of the interval, one who existed between two worlds, the world before the fall and the world after the exile. He is not remembered for great deeds, but for keeping alive the flame of a time no one else could see. That teaches us something profound, that the greatest spiritual strength is not in conquering, but in preserving, keeping the flame. Guarding what still pulses. And you? What are you protecting? What part of you still listens, even when everything around you screams? In many hidden monasteries, there is a prayer made of a single word, breathe. They believe that the breath of Seth can still be activated through conscious breathing, because within the breath is the hidden name. Within the breath is the spark. Within the breath is the call. This teaching crossed the centuries like a golden thread passing through eyes that never met, but it remains, alive, subtle, available. And what if your very breath is the missing code to remember who you are? In the lost city of Nag Hammadi, archaeologists found a ceramic jar with mysterious inscriptions. One of them read, "The soul that listens is the temple of the wind." This phrase echoes the same principle. Listening is the altar, the body, the temple, and the breath, the presence. Everything Seth represented is there, a spirituality without structure, but with roots, a faith that is not shouted, but lived in the silence between words. Can the modern soul once again become a temple of the wind? Seth's listening was not passive, it was active, like someone waiting for something precious, even without knowing when or how it will come. The wisdom of Solomon, apocryphal, declares, "Blessed are those who wait in silence for the visit of wisdom." Seth waited, and for that, he received. Do you still know how to wait, or have you been overtaken by the hurry of men? Some things can only be revealed in the time of breath, in the time of God. And only those who live in that time can hear what is being spoken right now, within you. The Gnostics believed that every soul had an original sound, a tone that vibrated in the instant of creation and could be found again. This sound was called the chord of Seth. Many sought that tone through chanting, fasting, and contemplation. They said that when the sound is rediscovered, the soul aligns with the cosmos and the kingdom. Have you heard your sound? Or are you living with borrowed noise? Maybe that's why, even surrounded by words, you still feel something is missing, something only the breath can bring back. Seth is the name of the breath that was never lost, of the memory that still lives. And if you felt something shift while reading, maybe it's not the text, but your soul trying to remember. Breathe, listen, and if something inside you touched this vibration, share in the comments what you felt. And subscribe to continue this invisible listening with others who, like you, still know that the soul has a voice, and it is whispering now. In one of the caves of Qumran, a fragment was found that never reached the public eye. On it, a sentence that still unsettles scholars to this day. And Seth saw what Adam had forgotten. What did Adam forget? What could be so grave that even the patriarchs chose not to record it? Some believe Adam concealed a knowledge too dangerous for humanity. But Seth, born out of sorrow, saw what was not meant to be seen. And what he saw became his mission, to preserve what had already been lost. Can you imagine what it's like to carry the memory of paradise while the world crumbles around you? The veil is not made of cloth. It is made of interpretation, of dogma, of stories told from only one side. When the councils decided what should be remembered, they also chose what should be forgotten. And the name of Seth was gradually erased from liturgies, from pulpits, from schools. All that remained was a brief mention in genealogies. But why? What was it about that name that posed such a threat? Perhaps because Seth represented the possibility of a free spirituality, one that existed before any institution. And that has always been dangerous to those who live off the control of faith. In the Gospel of Judas, Codex Chakos, Jesus laughs when he sees the disciples offering sacrifices in the temple. He says, "You worship the wrong God," a disturbing phrase, but it gains new meaning when read in light of the lineage of Seth. The children of Seth do not offer sacrifices. They listen. They do not seek divine favor. They preserve what was already given. Jesus' laughter is not mockery, it is sorrow. Because even after millennia, mankind still seeks outside what was placed within. And perhaps Seth was the first to truly understand this. An ancient Coptic tradition tells of a time when Seth withdrew for 7 days and 7 nights without speaking to anyone. Upon returning, he said only one sentence. Only one. The name must not be spoken, but remembered. What does that mean? Some teachers believe he was referring to the lost name of God, the one uttered before the Tower of Babel. Others believe it was the name of the soul, that forgotten word that reconnects you to the divine without needing an intermediary. What name does your soul long to remember, and what would happen if you finally heard it? In the Apocalypse of Moses, a rare text excluded from the canon, Eve tells Seth she saw paradise close behind her, but that an invisible door remained open in the pure of heart. This door, according to the text, could only be accessed by those who maintained their original purity, not of behavior, but of essence, of consciousness. of vibration. This might explain why the lineage of Seth was called incorruptible. They were not perfect, but they remained connected to what is real. And what if that door is still open? What if it's closer than you think? In the Thanksgiving hymn 1QH, there is mention of the children of silence, beings who walk among men like shadows, yet carry the seal of truth. They do not speak loudly, they do not argue, but wherever they pass, the veil begins to tear. Could these be the spiritual heirs of Seth? Those who do not preach, but live, who do not impose, but resonate. The veil in this context is everything that hides the essential, and when someone truly listens, the veil begins to tremble. Have you felt that trembling? Felt as if something was being unveiled within you? Jesus says in Luke 17:21, "The kingdom of God is within you." But that phrase has been diluted, decontextualized, dismissed. Because if the kingdom is within, then the temple becomes you. And the lineage of Seth, which held this secret, becomes a threat. They did not need priests, nor outward rituals, because the altar was in the chest. The offering was silence. The revelation was listening. What power would an inner religion like this have in today's world? Is that why such effort was made to bury this truth? An obscure Armenian manuscript, translated by monks in the 11th century, claims that Seth engraved 7 teachings into stones around Eden before its entrance was sealed. One of them read, "When the final veil is torn, the eyes will see not the end, but the return." This changes everything, because there is no end for the soul that remembers, only reconnection. And what if your spiritual journey is not to take you somewhere new, but to bring you back to the forgotten origin? And what if you've already been there, only to forget? Perhaps the thickest veil is not outside, but within. Perhaps what blinds the soul is the belief that we must earn what has already been given, that we must search for what already lives in us. Seth reminds us that the veil only tears when the gaze shifts, when the soul stops running and starts listening. And if something in you has begun to see through the mist, share in the comments what is being revealed, and subscribe to keep tearing the veil alongside those who already sense what lies behind it. There is a difference between what satisfies and what merely fills. Throughout the centuries, religions tried to quench the soul's thirst with dogmas, structures, and temples, but the lineage of Seth never drank from those sources. They walked through the desert, not as the lost, but as those waiting for the right water. In the Qumran hymns, there is a rare prayer, "Do not give me the wine of kings, but the dew of dawn." This thirst is for something the world cannot offer. It is for memory, for meaning, for origin. A thirst that only awakens when the soul senses something was forgotten. And maybe you've felt that your entire life. In the tradition of the children of light, there was a teaching passed only to the initiated. Every hunger has an echo, and every echo comes from the origin. This means the spiritual longing we feel carries the imprint of what we lost before birth. And what was lost? Direct intimacy with the divine. The living voice. The knowing that the sacred is not distant. True thirst is born when this memory begins to pulse within us. And that's when the lineage of Seth appears, not as preachers, but as living reminders. And what if your thirst is really a calling? Seth didn't build temples, didn't found cities, didn't lead crowds. But according to the Book of Jubilees, he taught his sons to record the signs of the stars and the cycles of the waters. This was more than science. It was a way of aligning with sacred time, with heaven's rhythm. It meant drinking from divine order, not from man-made calendars. This practice was lost. In its place, we adopted artificial rhythms, modern anxieties. But the soul still senses something is out of sync. And when it perceives this, thirst is born. A thirst for time that heals, not consumes. In the Gospel of Thomas, Logion 28, Jesus says, "I was thirsty, and you gave me drink from a spring that never runs dry." He wasn't speaking of physical water, but of recognition. Those who truly saw him fed his soul. Only those who've drunk from the same source can offer that water. That's why the heirs of Seth don't give speeches. They satisfy with their presence. Their listening soothes. Their memory heals. Their thirst becomes an offering. Is that why, even unknowingly, some people make us feel like we're coming home? The ancients called this thirst the hunger for the name. Not just any name, but the unutterable one. The primordial vibration that upheld the universe, and which Adam heard before the fall. Seth inherited that sound, and so wherever he walked, the trees fell silent, the winds stood still. This thirst is not for knowledge, it is for reconnection, and until it is quenched, everything will feel shallow. Have you felt this? That sense that everything seems fine on the outside, but something inside still cries for a memory no one can explain. A forgotten tradition among the early Christians spoke of baptism without water, a state of consciousness where the soul recognizes its origin before the ritual. This was associated with the lineage of Seth. His descendants bore the inner mark. They didn't need external rites to know who they were. This doesn't devalue symbols, but reveals that the true water is inward. That recognition comes before ceremony. And what if you already know, even without hearing out, what your soul has always been? Could it be you've already been baptized within? In the Acmim Codex, in a gospel attributed to Hermas of Rome, there's a phrase, "The Spirit does not dwell where there is fullness of falsehood." This reveals that our thirst remains because we're fed by illusions. And that's precisely the role of Seth's lineage, to cut off the false springs. They don't offer ready answers. They give us the right question, the one that sets us in motion. Because the true search doesn't arise from explanation, but from restlessness. What was the question that brought you here? And is it still alive within you? Among desert monks, there was a sunrise gesture. They touched their forehead to the ground and said, "Remind me of the source." That gesture was a call not to live the day in forgetfulness. The lineage of Seth taught that each morning was a new Eden, but only the thirsty could perceive it. Because only those who miss something can recognize what was lost, and only those who recognize can return. Do you still long for something without a name? Maybe it's because your soul is more awake than you realized, and it's asking to go back to where it came from. When speaking to the Samaritan woman, Jesus said, "Whoever drinks the water I give will never thirst again." But he wasn't speaking of wells. He was speaking of revelation, of memory, of origin. The water that satisfies is the one that reconnects. And that's what Seth's lineage carries, a call to drink once again from what was silenced. This thirst is the beginning of return, and maybe you are closer to the source than you've ever been. Maybe all that's left is to stretch out your hands and stop drinking what has no life. If you felt that thirst awaken within you, don't ignore it. Share in the comments what your soul is still searching for. And subscribe, not as a ritual, but as a response. Because only those who thirst can find the source. And only those who find it know they were never truly lost. That what was missing was never outside, but the remembrance of what had always been within. And now perhaps you're starting to hear the sound of the water before the world. For centuries, the lineage of Seth was believed to be nothing more than a historical continuation. But in the Gnostic manuscripts of Nag Hammadi, especially Zostrianos and the Gospel of Truth, Seth is cited as the ancestor of an incorruptible race, whose members never forgot the sound of the light. They are not remembered by traditional religion. They were erased because they knew too much. They knew the kingdom would not come with outward signs. They knew God does not dwell in temples made by human hands, and such awareness threatened everything built afterward. In the Gospel of the Egyptians, Codex III, a figure called Eternal Seth is described as the first among the immortals, the one who guarded the name when all others forgot. Theologians ignored this text, but mystics understood. It's not about a person, but a state of being, a soul that did not fall, even when born into a fallen world. And what if that soul still reincarnates? What if people like you, who feel the calling without knowing why, are heirs of that name? How many times have you felt you carry something no one taught you, but you've always known? In an Ethiopian manuscript held in the library of Axum, there's a tale of an ancient book given by Adam to Seth, a book of light, not made of ink, but of memory. In it were 7 phrases never spoken aloud. According to tradition, whoever reads those phrases correctly will see the place from which they came and to which they return. That book has never been found, but some believe its fragments survived in parables, hymns, and dreams. Have you ever dreamed something that felt more real than life itself? The Gospel of Truth says, "Ignorance is not the absence of knowledge, but the forgetting of origin." That changes everything. We are not ignorant because we failed to learn, but because we forgot. And to forget is to lose the thread that connects us to the kingdom. Seth, according to hidden texts, was the guardian of that thread. He didn't come to found a religion. but to prevent complete forgetting. And now, in a world drowning in noise, his mission echoes again. Are you remembering something? Something that didn't come from the mind, but from the soul? Among the Essenes, there was a scroll called the Book of the Inner Breath. It was never fully translated, but in one passage it reads, "The sound of truth is not heard, it is felt." This phrase carries the essence of Seth's lineage, because those who belong to it do not persuade, they resonate. Have you ever stood before someone who said nothing, but changed everything? Have you ever read a phrase that felt like it was written just for you? These are the traces of the breath. And what if you are being called right now? In the Testament of Adam, an apocryphal Syriac text, there's a hidden prophecy. In the 7th generation, the sound shall be restored, and eyes shall see without light. The 7th generation does not refer to literal genealogy, but to the spiritual maturity of humanity. Are we living in that time? Are the eyes beginning to see the invisible? Is the soul beginning to recognize sounds long asleep? The explosion of truth does not come with earthquakes, but with sudden silence, when everything stops and something within breaks. Have you felt that break? The early followers of the Way, before institutional Christianity, spoke of a language not made of words. They called it the inner voice. They said it was how Jesus recognized the children of the kingdom, not by what they said, but by what they carried. That voice teaches no doctrine. It awakens remembrance. And perhaps that's why the children of Seth were persecuted, scattered, silenced. Because wherever they go, masks fall, structures tremble, and all that is false begins to crumble. Do you feel that collapse or that liberation? The Gospel of Mary reveals, the soul that rises to heaven is questioned by powers, and only the one who knows its origin may pass through them. That makes us wonder, what good is belief in doctrines if we don't remember who we are? The lineage of Seth does not give answers. It returns the question, and the question is the key. It opens portals the world forgot, portals that were within us all along. Maybe you're passing through one right now, without even realizing it. And when you emerge, you won't be the same. The explosion isn't out there. It's inside you. That moment when everything collapses, so truth can appear. The instant you realize you never needed permission to return home, because home was never a place. It was always a state of being. And if this truth touched you on any level, comment what was broken open inside, and subscribe so this journey stays alive among those who still dare to remember. Because when you remember, the whole world begins to change. What if everything you've believed until now was only a shadow of the truth? That question echoes like a silent thunder in the soul. It's not about denying what we've learned, but recognizing what was hidden. Many grew up believing salvation depended on behavior, dogma, obedience. But the heirs of Seth knew something different. That reconnection doesn't come from outside, but from within. And when that truth is felt, everything around begins to collapse. The structure shakes. The ground trembles. Because at last, the soul begins to awaken. In the secret Gospel of John, Jesus reveals to his disciples that the world was created by powers that do not know fullness, and that only a few, the children of light, would be able to pierce the veil. Among those children, the lineage of Seth is seen as one of the last resistances to total forgetting. This doesn't place you above others, but it places you before a choice to keep sleeping or to cross over, and crossing hurts. Because it demands detachment, courage, silence, and a kind of faith that seeks no reward, only presence. Spiritual collapse isn't a scream, it's absence. The absence of meaning where once there was certainty. It's when rituals lose their flavor, words no longer comfort. The temple turns cold, because the soul realizes it's been seeking in the wrong place. In that moment, many fall into crisis, and that crisis is sacred. It is the birth of the Spirit. And that's what Seth represents. The child born after blood has already stained the earth. He doesn't come to celebrate. He comes to restore. And his coming hurts. Because before the light, there is morning. In the Gospel of Thomas, Logian 70, Jesus says, "When you give birth to what is within you will save you." But no one speaks of the labor pains of that birth. The moment when everything inside us resists change. The ego, the fears, the attachments, the old voices, everything tries to stop the new from arriving. But it's already coming, and it can no longer be held back, because truth does not need permission. It simply enters, like light into a dark room, like fire in the heart, like silence at the eye of the storm. Seth carries within him the archetype of the silent restorer, the one who, even while wounded, guards what is sacred. And you? What are you still guarding? What do you still fear to remember? Maybe the collapse you're feeling isn't destruction, but revelation, because only those who reach the end of the road can discover a new path, and sometimes that new path has no signs, no maps, no guarantees, only a sound, an echo, a breath, and a certainty that no one can explain. But that won't stop pulsing in the depths of your chest. Gnostic tradition speaks of the sacred sorrow, the moment the soul realizes how far it strayed, how it was manipulated, how it drifted from the source trying to please outer voices. But that sorrow is holy, because it cleanses us, prepares us, empties us to receive. The lineage of Seth endured that morning in silence, because they knew, before remembrance comes the pain of knowing we've been far from ourselves for too long. But now, you have returned, or are returning. In the secret book of James, a text excluded from the Bible, Jesus says, "Weep for yourselves, for your eyes shall be opened, and you will see what was always hidden." This is not a threat, it's an invitation to face what we've long avoided, that we are more than what we were told, and that this truth demands responsibility, not before religion, but before the soul. Because now you know, and once you know, you can no longer pretend not to. Collapse is the beginning of spiritual responsibility, and that's why so many choose to stay asleep. Seth had to choose too, between silence and denial, between guarding the light or letting it fade. He chose to remember, even without applause, even without an audience, and maybe that's the choice in front of you now. Stay at the surface, or descend inward, into the dark, into the place where the soul burns, because it's only there that the true flame ignites, and once it ignites, there is no going back. For an awakened soul never again fits into a world that sleeps. Many came here seeking answers, but what they found was a mirror, because this journey doesn't offer ready-made truths. It gives you keys, and each key opens a door inside you. Collapse is not the end, it is the crossing. And when you cross, you realize everything around you has changed. Because you have changed, you remembered. And now the question is unavoidable. What will you do with what has been restored in your spirit? If something inside you broke open, don't hold it back. Share in the comments what crumbled within you. And subscribe, not out of obligation, but to walk alongside those who also fell and chose to rise. Because collapse is not a fall, it is liberation. And the soul only rises again when all that was noise becomes living silence. In the silence of many hidden scrolls, one phrase appears again and again. Those of Seth do not belong to the world. But what does that really mean? Perhaps it means they don't follow ordinary time. They are not fed by praise. They don't build on applause. Their home has no walls. Their faith needs no approval. And their strength is not in doing, but in remaining. Remaining when everything screams. Remaining when everything roars. Remaining when all that is false collapses. And what if that's all that's being asked of you right now? The Gospel of Truth says, "Those who remember are persecuted by forgetfulness." This is no metaphor. It is a spiritual reality. Remembering takes effort. It disturbs. It burns. It separates. And the lineage of Seth was marked by this: to live among men, but not be of them. To guard the light, even when it's not wanted. To be the link between what was and what is yet to come. Are you willing to carry that kind of solitude? To be a bridge between times no one else sees? The Ethiopian Apocalypse speaks of a book that will be given to the last ones, not to explain, but to remember. This book will not be made of letters, but of echoes. Each page will be an experience, not a doctrine. It will be read not with the eyes, but with the heart. And only those who still weep for what was forgotten will be able to understand it. Do you still weep? Are you still moved by what the world rejects? Do you still long for something you've never seen, but your soul knows as home? The temple fell. The veil was torn. The voices went silent. Now only the whisper remains. And the whisper says, return, not to a place, but to yourself, to the beginning, to the spark, The lineage of Seth doesn't point to the future. It points inward, because that's where the unfulfilled promise lies. That's where the altar without a name burns. That's where the flame no one can extinguish still glows. And maybe everything you've searched for until now has been this: to return to the moment before the pain, before the fall, before the forgetting. Maybe Seth wasn't sent to continue, but to interrupt the cycle of blood, to interrupt the shouting, to interrupt the detour. He is born as a crack in the narrative, as a breath between screams, as a yes that comes after the no. His existence is rupture. And when you hear of him, you feel the same rupture within, a sacred crack, a wound that heals, a silence that reconnects you to everything that once seemed lost. In the Chakos Codex, the Gospel of Judas shows Jesus laughing, not in scorn, but because he sees beyond. He sees that everything that seemed grand was actually fragile, and that the true kingdom is invisible. Those of Seth laugh too, but with reverence, because they know that power is not on the stage, it is in the unseen. And now that you've seen behind the veil, doesn't everything feel smaller, less urgent, less noisy? Because when the Spirit awakens, the world shrinks. There's a forgotten passage in the Gospel of Philip that says, "The world was born from a mistake, but those who awaken do not belong to it." That's frightening, but it's also freeing. Because if the world as we know it is distortion, then waking up is an act of courage, an act of return, an act of fire. And that is what you have begun now. A return without a map, but with direction. And that direction is inward, upward, beyond, toward what has not yet been spoken, but has already been felt. The desert masters used to say, "When the name returns, the bones will sing." That's not poetic, it's literal. The vibration of the forgotten name will awaken even those who thought themselves dead inside, because the spirit doesn't die, it only sleeps. And Seth came to remember what sleeps, to rekindle what was extinguished, to whisper the name that still lives in you. A name that cannot be spoken, but can be recognized. And when it is recognized, nothing will ever be the same again. You were not brought here by chance. Something guided you, something pulsed, something answered. And maybe that something is the very lineage of Seth, whispering in your spirit, "You are one of us." It doesn't matter if you don't understand it all right now. Understanding will come as you walk. The sound will come as you listen. The remembering will come in silence. And when it comes, there will be no doubt. Only the certainty that it was always there, waiting for your yes. If something in you still vibrates, even after the end, share in the comments what was not said, but was felt. And subscribe, not as a ritual, but as communion. Because this is not the end. It is only the beginning of a revelation that still pulses. Even when the video ends,